So the next day, my father went to see him, only this time with Luca Brasi. And within an hour, he signed a release for a certified check of $1,000.
How'd he do that?
My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
What was that?
Luca Brasi held a gun to his head, and my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract.
Before we move forward, it is important to understand what a motif is. It is a recurring part of the story that is used for stitching it together, eventually adding to the theme of the movie. Screenwriter Francis Ford Coppola, along with Mario Puzo and Robert Towne, use refusal as a motif throughout this film. Eventually, refusal, either through dialogues or actions, becomes not only an integral part of the movie but also a pivotal one. The film follows a conventional three-act structure. The first act consists of the introduction of not just the characters but also the functioning of the Corleone family. Right from the scene of Bonacera's visit to the Don to Voltz's discovery of Khartoum's severed head on his bed, the whole act revolves around the characters who are mostly divided into two categories: the ones you don't say no to and the ones who are not allowed to refuse anything. Let's consider the beginning of the movie, which opens with Bonacera pleading the Don to help him avenge the injustice done to his daughter. During his monologue, Bonacera describes his tragic situation, throughout which the camera dollies out, and the first glimpse we get of Vito Corleone is his back facing the camera. A cut later, when he faces the camera, it starts with a refusal to help Bonacera, and it eventually ends with Vito gaining Bonacera's respect in return. That's when the ambient sounds start to pour in, and throughout this scene, we cut back and forth between Connie's wedding and Vito's office. This act is mostly filled with many people coming to Don Corleone asking for help, and also the introduction of several characters including Michael, who would later become another protagonist. One of the integral scenes of this act is the introduction of Johnny Fontaine, a singer who made his career with the help of the Corleone family. Michael tells Johnny's story to his girlfriend, giving rise to one of the most iconic lines in film history.
My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
When Fontaine meets Vito, he tells him about Voltz's refusal to cast him in a movie that would be his biggest break. Vito's adopted son Tom Hagen is sent to LA, finding out that Voltz is still adamant in refusing Fontaine's role. So the Corleone family makes him an offer he couldn't refuse. Here's when the second act starts with the introduction of Virgil Sollozzo, a drug trafficker who is interested in expanding his business in the territories of the five families. This is probably the best introduction of a character in the entire film. We crosscut between a scene where Vito, Tom and Sonny are discussing Sollozzo and another scene where Sollozzo is entering the building and climbing up the stairs to meet the Corleone family. The whole point of the meeting becomes null and void when the Don finally says no to Sollozzo's demands of involving drugs in business. And this becomes the turning point of the film, when Vito Corleone himself says no to one of his equals. Things become chaotic from now onwards when Sollozzo tries proving that he isn't the one to be refused, which eventually triggers a gang war. Vito Corleone is shot, Bruno Tattaglia is killed. Michael kills Sollozzo and McCluskey, and Santino is assassinated. All because of a refusal. A right Corleone thought only he had. Vito Corleone arranges a meeting with the heads of the five families, where Barzini and Tattaglia point out Corleone's act of refusal as a reason of this war.
We can do anything we want. A refusal is not the act of a friend.
Vito eventually agrees to the involvement of drugs under the condition that they are controlled. Now Michael takes over as the head of the Corleone family as he travels to Las Vegas to meet Moe Greene. This scene becomes interesting. There are two phases of negotiations here. The first is with Johnny Fontaine and the second is with Moe Greene. As Michael explains to Fontaine about giving up the olive oil business and investing in casino business, he repeats the same dialogue before handing the contracts to Fontaine.
I'll make him an offer he can't refuse.
The makers are smart enough to keep the camera on Fontaine as he receives the contract, considering that Vito had made a similar offer to the band leader to boost Fontaine's career. Throughout Michael's convincing, he is expressionless, as he is probably thinking that refusing this offer isn't really a smart move. He looks at Michael, who shakes his head, gesturing him to sign, making Fontaine realize that he doesn't really have any option, following which he accepts the contract with a smile. The second is with Moe Greene, which is quite different from that of Fontaine. Contrary to the Fontaine negotiation, this becomes a heated argument following which Mogreen refuses the offer Michael makes. Now comes the final act, which starts after Vito Corleone's death and the rise of Michael as the new ruthless head of the family. After the famous baptism sequence, where Michael has all the heads of the 5 families killed, he moves on to Tessio and Carlo, both of which consist refusals which eventually fail. Later, Michael's wife Kay grills him after Connie accuses him of murdering Carlo. And this particular scene where Michael tells Kay not to ask him about his business ends with Michael refusing her with a lie.
Is it true?
There are a few observations here. The first is character introduction. The 3 important characters of this movie whom you can't say no to are introduced in a similar way. Their first appearances in this movie constitute their backs facing the camera. It's a subtle message that these characters don't care about the people around them and it's purely selfish business. The second is the effect of refusal. Every refusal in this movie has either brought someone on the verge of consequences or has been a result of multiple deaths. The third is the symmetry. The Godfather follows the last in first outro. It starts with a man addressing Vito as Don Corleone, followed by the Don telling him a blunt no, while the ending has Michael, the new Don, saying no to Kay, followed by Clemenza kissing his hands, addressing him as Don Corleone. The Godfather uses motifs in such an extensive and a regulated manner. Every node of the story has refusals to play their parts, eventually weaving a perfect narrative while adhering to the theme. And it grips us throughout its duration and has become one of the most beloved classics ever. Next time you watch a movie, notice these elements because it's small things like these which enhance the quality of storytelling and makes a film you can't refuse.